The topic of our talk is farmed animals and the meat industry. My name is Dave Simon. I'm a lawyer and I'm the author of Meatonomics. I'm going to go kind of quickly because I want to give you an overview of this book, so I'm going to talk fast. We do have Q&A, and if we exceed the Q&A, I'll be available afterwards to sign a few copies of the book in whatever the room is. Several years ago, I sent an email to a bunch of friends with a question in it about a factory farming video. I wanted to know what people thought of the video. I got a lot of responses back, but the one that really stuck out for me was from the dean of a major law school who said, in his view, the human behavior that he saw in that video was illegal, and that made it irrelevant and exceptional. It didn't rise to the level of something that we need to worry about. I didn't know if he was right or not because I didn't know how the law applied to farming animals, but I wasn't a lawyer, but I was a check. And what I found out really shocked me. That is that in the last 3 decades in this country, animal food producers have embarked on an aggressive, systematic campaign to emasculate virtually all of the anti-cruelty protections that once applied to farm animals. But that's not it. They've gone further. It made it difficult or impossible in many states for consumers to criticize, investigate, or sue them. Now, this very broad, elaborate scope of legislative protection doesn't help consumers, and it doesn't help animals.
I don't think your mic is working.
Can you tilt it up? It's droopy. Do you have a way to tighten this?
Yes,
Yeah, but it's going to keep drooping. So, I got it. There you go. It works on airplanes too. All right. These laws protect the animal food producers who lobby so hard to get them passed. And they protect them in a couple of important ways. First, they provide them with a valuable set of economic benefits by allowing them to offload their costs onto society. They also give animal producers the ability to control and manipulate consumer behavior in very bizarre ways. Now, recognizing that these economic benefits are at play led me to write this book. And one of the themes of this book is that while we're used to thinking about factory farms as having 3 problems, ethical, nutritional, and environmental, we need to think of them as having a 4th problem, and that is economic, because they affect our economy in a lot of unfortunate ways. Another theme of the book is that consumer control issue that I mentioned. So what I want to do in the next 15 minutes is give you an overview of the book, and I'll talk about 3 things. First, how is it that animal food producers manage to control and manipulate consumer behavior in this country? Second, what are some of the economic consequences that result? And third, what are some solutions to these problems? In 1932, Aldous Huxley published his book, Brave New World. He envisioned a future that wasn't really a brave new one, so the title is ironic. The future that he envisioned is a creepy dystopian one, in which the government exists for one purpose, and that's to get consumers to buy more goods. The government, in the Huxleyan version of the future, accomplishes this goal by relentlessly bombarding people with messages. So, for example, because it's better for the economy to buy a new shirt rather than stitch up an old one, these messages are things like, ending is better than mending. The more stitches, the less riches. We are living in a version of this Huxleyan future today because our government is engaged in a relentless campaign to convince consumers to buy more animal products. This campaign is executed through programs called checkoffs, like check a box. Checkoffs are created by Congress, they're overseen by the USDA, and in 2005, the United States Supreme Court said, when a checkoff program speaks, it speaks the message of the United States federal government. As a matter of federal law, enunciated by the highest court in this country, checkoff programs speak the message of the federal government. So, when you hear beef, it's what's for dinner, milk, it does a body good, pork, the other white meat, incredible edible egg, these messages are your federal government telling you to eat more animal foods. Perhaps this wouldn't be so offensive. Good timing. Okay, here we go. Perhaps this wouldn't be offensive if these checkoff programs weren't so incredibly effective. This table compiles data that the checkoff programs themselves have released. The checkoff programs themselves tell us for every dollar we spend, we see this many dollars in extra sales. On average, it's about 8 to 1. So $1 in checkoff spending yields $8 in sales. So in 2012, checkoff spent $550 million, and at the bottom right you see that the extra sales of animal foods that resulted was $4.6 billion. That is a massive effect. Most people had never heard of these programs. I had never heard of them, and I'd never connected milk that does a body good with the federal government and with my tax dollars. But that's what's happening. That's why these programs are so important and why they should be on our radar. That's one way that animal food producers influence consumer behavior. Let me talk about another way, and that is through the massive legislative agenda that I spoke about initially. There are 5 categories of laws that exist at the state level that protect animal food production. I only have time to talk about them very briefly. Most people are familiar with ag-gag laws. Those are the laws that make it illegal to investigate a factory farm. Food defamation laws, which we have in 13 states, these are laws that say that if, one can be sued for defaming food. That is to say, if you say something that is damaging and untrue about food, you can be sued. Oprah Winfrey got sued for defaming beef. Cheeseburger laws that we have in half of the states in the country are laws that say that a plaintiff cannot recover against a food manufacturer, retailer, or distributor on the theory that food made the plaintiff obese or contributed to an obesity-related disease. Kind of fading in and out with this thing. Eco-terrorism laws are laws that provide for enhanced criminal penalties for what would otherwise be relatively innocuous crimes like vandalism, theft, trespassing. If the target is an animal enterprise, the penalty is higher. Animal enterprise is virtually any commercial enterprise that deals in animals: restaurants, factory farms, testing facilities, grocery stores, etc. But customary farming exemptions, this is really the big one. This is why I wrote this book. A customary farming exemption takes a state's anti-cruelty statute and it carves out an exemption for farm animals and says this statute does not apply to farm animals. And I want to read you an example of how this works. In 1854, the Connecticut legislature passed a statute which prohibited cruelty to any animal. Very broad. It's great. In 1996, the Connecticut legislature adopted a customary farming exemption. This is how the statute currently reads. It's legal in Connecticut to maliciously and intentionally maim, mutilate, torture, wound, or kill an animal, provided the act is done while following generally accepted agricultural practices. What this means, and we have these laws in 50 states, and we have them by statute in about 4 out of 5 states, and the rest we have them by judicial decision-making or the common law. What this means is that it's up to animal food producers to decide what constitutes cruelty to farmed animals. If a few producers get together and start cutting off a particular body part with or without anesthesia, it is deemed to be legal. And this is just as if we were to give nursing home operators in this country the authority to decide what constitutes elder abuse. It's classic fox in the hen house. Bruce is going to talk about specifics of customary farming exemptions, so I won't go into the details, but we'll get that shortly. Okay, so where are we? Kind of racing through here. This elaborate framework of legal protection allows producers to offload their costs on society. If I take my garbage to the front of my driveway and put it there for the garbage service to pick up, I have internalized my cost of garbage collection, which is appropriate. I generate the garbage, I pay to have it picked up. If instead I take my garbage to the local park and dump it there at midnight, I have externalized my garbage collection costs. Externalized costs are costs that are not borne by the parties to a transaction, but are imposed on other parties, and in this case, society. So I argue that, metaphorically speaking, animal food producers are dumping their garbage in our parks at midnight. On an annual basis, animal food producers in this country are externalizing about $414 billion worth of their production costs To put this number in context, it's about 1/4 of Canada's gross domestic product. It's about half of what we spend on Social Security spending each year. I don't have time to go into all these categories. There's a chapter in my book devoted to each category. The math is based on published, peer-reviewed research and on government reports, and it's extremely conservative. I think the real figure is over $1 billion, and hopefully someday the research will exist to demonstrate the real figure. Another way to look at this, another perspective on these externalized costs is this chart, which takes on the far left, the yellow column, that's the annual retail sales of animal foods, which is $251 billion in this country. The middle column is the externalized costs. The total on the right is the total cost to consumers, which is about $665 billion per year. That yields this formula at the bottom that says, for every $1 of animal foods sold at retail, about $1.70 in externalized cost is generated and imposed on society. So, for example, every time McDonald's sells a Big Mac for $5, $8 of costs are imposed on society. So a $5 Big Mac really costs $13. But because at retail, people only spend $5 for it, it's fair to say that the retail prices of Big Macs and other animal foods are artificially low as a result of cost externalization. As a result of this massive cost externalization, just as you might expect, prices have fallen over the last 75 years as externalization has become more popular. Since 1935, on an inflation-adjusted basis, the retail price of butter is down 44%, ham is down 48%, eggs are down 69%, chicken is down 74%. The law of demand says when prices go down, demand goes up. But just as you might expect, demand has gone up radically in the last century. We've doubled our consumption of meat in this country, going from about 100 pounds per person to peaking at about 200 pounds per person. Now we're just a little bit under that. This chart shows chicken. You can see that as chicken prices have come down from $5 a pound in 1935 to $1.34 a pound a couple years ago. Consumption is going from 9 pounds per person to 56 pounds per person, just as the law of demand predicts, and moving in lockstep with the growth of externalization of costs. So let me summarize to this point. I think I have a couple more minutes. Animal food producers externalize the vast majority of their costs. The result of that externalization is that they can charge lower prices for their foods. The result of those prices being so low is that consumers eat much more of those foods than they would otherwise. Today, the United States leads the world in per capita meat consumption. We also have some of the highest rates of obesity, heart disease, cancer, and other diseases related to animal food consumption. What can we do about it? Well, in this country, we tax tobacco at an average rate of about 72%, and the result over the last 50 years or so has been that tobacco consumption, has gone from about 50%, or 1 in 2 people smoking, to less than 20%, or 1 in 5 people smoking. Taxes are not the only reason that consumption has fallen, but they are a major reason. Taxes in this case also have a second benefit, which is that they drive revenue, a so-called double dividend of what is known as a Pigovian tax, named after the Cambridge economist Arthur Pigou. So, what I suggest is the completely non-radical idea of a meat tax, or a tax that would be imposed on all foods that contain any animal products. I suggest a 50% tax imposed at the point of sale. Thank you. And because this tax would tend to increase the annual food budget of those who do eat animal products, I also propose on average, $500 tax credit to every tax-paying unit in this country, which would balance out that extra cost. The result would be a shift in consumption, and people would simply consume about 44% less animal foods than they do today, and they would replace that with plant-based foods. A tax of this nature would have a number of significant benefits. We'd be able to save about 170,000 human lives every year that would otherwise be lost to disease related to animal foods. We'd be able to save 26 billion land animals' lives who'd otherwise be killed land and marine animals' lives in this country who'd otherwise be killed for food. be able to return to its native habitat about 600,000 square miles of land, which would no longer be needed to raise animals or to feed crops to feed them. Lots of other benefits. And of course, at a personal level, we can also make a decision to eat less animal foods. Better yet, we can go vegan. As this slide shows, there are a lot of personal benefits to taking a step like that. You would enjoy lower cholesterol, a lower body mass index, and a greater life expectancy. So I'm basically done. I want to say thank you, and if you're not already doing so, I hope you will exercise the most powerful right that you have as a consumer, and that is to boycott this cruel and dysfunctional industry. Thank you very much.